You won't believe what Togo just did to foreign mining companies. The resistance is real. The AES Alliance just got stronger. Togo's bold crackdown is shaking the West. Foreign miners thought Africa would stay silent. Togo just proved them wrong. Western powers are furious. Here's how Togo just flipped the script. Togo drops a bombshell on foreign interests. This is what unity looks like. Africa is rising. Togo's latest move with Burkina, Mali, and Niger will shock you. Togo joins Traoré's fight, and foreign corporations are already panicking. Resource theft ends now. Togo takes a stand that could change Africa forever. First Burkina Faso, then Mali and Niger. Now Togo joins the anti-imperial front. What just happened in Togo has the West scrambling. Full story inside. Togo joins the resistance. In a bold move that's shaking the foundations of Western control in Africa, Togo cracks down on foreign mining operations shortly after signaling intent to join the powerful AES Alliance with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Led by strong anti-colonial leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Assimi Goïta, and General Tchiani, this alliance is sending a clear message. Africa is taking back its resources and reclaiming its sovereignty. In this video, we break down Togo's decision, the impact on foreign mining companies, and how this aligns with the AES bloc's Pan-African agenda. Is this the beginning of a new African revolution? Find out how Western-backed exploitation is being confronted head-on, and what it means for the future of Africa. Watch now and discover why Togo is standing up to foreign interests, what the AES Alliance means for Africa, how African unity is threatening global power structures, reactions from France, the EU, and the US. What's next for Africa's natural resources? Why Togo is standing up to foreign interests. Togo's growing resistance to foreign interests reflects a broader African movement towards sovereignty and self-determination, driven by historical grievances and a desire to redefine regional alliances. Under President Faure Gnassingbé, who has ruled since 2005, Togo has increasingly aligned itself with the Pan-Africanist narrative championed by junta-led states like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. This shift is rooted in Togo's strategic positioning and domestic political dynamics, as well as a rejection of perceived neo-colonial influence from Western powers, particularly France. Togo's foreign minister, Robert Dussey, has openly criticized the exploitation of Africa by major powers, stating, "Africa is used only to serve the interests of great powers, and this is unacceptable." This sentiment echoes public frustration with France's historical dominance in Francophone Africa, where economic structures like the CFA franc and military presence have been seen as tools of neo-colonialism. Togo's interest in joining the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, signals a strategic pivot toward regional cooperation with nations that have expelled French troops and rejected Western-backed institutions like the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. By aligning with the AES, Togo aims to leverage its port in Lomé as a critical trade hub for landlocked Sahel states, enhancing its regional influence while reducing dependence on Western partners. Domestically, Gnassingbé's alignment with anti-imperialist rhetoric bolsters his legitimacy amid criticism of his prolonged rule. A new constitution adopted in 2024 has faced opposition for potentially entrenching his power, and aligning with the AES serves as a diversion from these concerns, framing Togo as a champion of African sovereignty. Togo's historical role as a mediator between ECOWAS and junta-led states further positions it to balance traditional alliances with new partnerships, allowing it to challenge foreign influence without fully severing ties with Western institutions. Additionally, Togo's military cooperation with Russia, including the delivery of Mi-35 and Mi-17 helicopters in 2022, reflects a diversification of partnerships to counter Western dominance. What the AES Alliance means for Africa. The Alliance of Sahel States, AES, formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in September 2023 and formalized as a confederation in July 2024, represents a transformative shift in West African geopolitics. Established as a mutual defense pact following the 2023 Niger coup, the AES has evolved into a platform for economic, political, and cultural integration, challenging Western influence and traditional regional blocs like ECOWAS. Its significance for Africa lies in its ambition to prioritize sovereignty, resource control, and regional unity over external dependencies. The AES emerged from a shared frustration with ECOWAS, which the junta-led states accused of being subservient to France and ineffective against jihadist insurgencies. By withdrawing from ECOWAS in January 2025, the AES countries, led by Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré, Mali's Assimi Goïta, and Niger's Abdourahmane Tiani, have pursued an independent path, focusing on a common market, monetary union, and infrastructure development. For instance, they plan to introduce a 0.5% customs duty on non-AES imports and create an investment bank to fund projects in mining, energy, and agriculture. These initiatives aim to leverage the region's vast resources, including Niger's uranium, 25.4% of EU supplies in 2022, and Burkina Faso's gold, to foster economic self-sufficiency. For Africa, the AES signals a potential model for regional integration that prioritizes African solutions to African problems. Its rejection of the CFA franc and foreign resource extraction challenges the economic dominance of France and the EU, inspiring other nations like Togo and Chad to consider similar alignments. However, challenges remain, including ongoing insurgencies, economic isolation risks, and the lack of a clear democratic transition, which could undermine the AES's legitimacy. If successful, the AES could reshape West Africa by fostering a multipolar approach, aligning with powers like Russia and China to counter Western influence. How African unity is threatening global power structures. African unity, exemplified by initiatives like the AES and the African Union's AU push for greater global representation, is challenging established power structures by asserting control over the continent's resources and geopolitical influence. Africa's vast natural resources, gold, uranium, oil, and rare earth minerals, have long been exploited by Western powers, with France and the US maintaining significant economic and military influence in the Sahel and beyond. However, movements like the AES and Togo's pivot towards sovereignty threaten this dominance by prioritizing African agency and multipolar partnerships. The AES's withdrawal from ECOWAS and rejection of Western military presence, e.g., France's expulsion from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, signal a shift towards self-determination, reducing reliance on institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which have historically imposed stringent conditions. This unity is amplified by the AU's call for permanent Security Council seats and greater representation in global financial institutions, as articulated by Togo's President Nassing Bey at the UN General Assembly in 2024. International cooperation cannot be strengthened without a new model that is more equitable and respectful to African states. Such demands challenge the Western-led multilateral system, which has often marginalized African voices. The rise of non-Western partnerships, particularly with Russia and China, further disrupts global power structures. For example, Niger's uranium exports, critical to the EU, are now at risk as AES countries pivot toward Russia, which offers military and economic support without the political strings attached to Western aid. This shift threatens Western access to strategic resources and weakens their geopolitical leverage, prompting concerns in the US about a new Cold War in Africa. Posts on X highlight this sentiment, with users noting that African unity exposes the West's fear of an Africa that doesn't need them. However, internal challenges, such as insurgencies and economic disparities, could limit the impact of this unity if not addressed. Reactions from France, the EU, and the US. France has faced significant backlash in the Sahel due to its historical role as a colonial power and perceived neo-colonial practices. The expulsion of French troops from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger by 2023, coupled with Mali's withdrawal from the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie in March 2025, reflects deep anti-French sentiment. France has been accused of prioritizing its interests, such as access to uranium and gold, over African sovereignty, leading to demonstrations and diplomatic fallouts. French media and officials have criticized AES leaders, including Traore, as authoritarian, while some reports suggest France may have supported destabilization efforts, such as the alleged 2025 assassination plot against Traore. France's influence in Francophone Africa is in freefall, with its troop presence reduced from 10,000 to 4,000 in 5 years. European Union. The EU has expressed concern over the Sahel's shift away from Western partnerships, emphasizing the need to curb chaos and prevent rival powers like Russia and Iran from gaining influence. The EU has historically supported African peace and security through the Africa Peace Facility, allocating over €1 billion since 2021, but the AES's rejection of Western aid has limited its leverage. The EU is now focusing on coastal states like Côte d'Ivoire and Benin to counterbalance the AES, but fears of regional fragmentation and increased migration pressures persist. Some EU members, like Spain, advocate for supporting African governance reforms to maintain influence, but the bloc struggles with a lack of cohesive strategy. United States. The US has voiced alarm over the Sahel's pivot toward Russia, particularly after the withdrawal of US troops from Niger's Airbase 201 in 2024. AFRICOM's General Michael Langley has accused AES leaders of misusing resources, while Senator Rand Paul warned of declining U.S. soft power through USAID. The Biden administration's focus on projects like the Lobito Railway in Angola reflects an attempt to counter China's $300 billion trade dominance in Africa, but U.S. engagement remains limited compared to its focus on the Middle East and Asia. The U.S. has condemned Togo's constitutional changes but avoided punitive measures, reflecting a cautious approach to avoid pushing Togo further toward Russia. What's next for Africa's natural resources? Africa's natural resources, gold, uranium, oil, cobalt, and rare earth minerals, are at the heart of its push for sovereignty and the global competition for influence. The AES's focus on resource nationalization, such as Burkina Faso's gold and Niger's uranium, signals a broader trend toward retaining wealth for national development. Burkina Faso has increased gold processing capacity, contributing to a 17% GDP rise, while Niger's uranium exports, critical to the EU, are now leveraged for economic autonomy. The AES plans to create a currency backed by these resources, aiming to replace the CFA franc and reduce Western economic control. The AU's Agenda 2063 emphasizes sustainable industrialization and the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, to shift Africa from a raw material exporter to a manufacturer of processed goods. This vision includes investments in cross-border infrastructure, such as the Lobito Railway, to facilitate trade and reduce reliance on foreign ports. However, challenges persist, including insurgencies in the Sahel, which disrupt mining operations, and potential economic isolation due to AES's exit from ECOWAS, which could increase maritime access costs. Non-Western powers like China, Russia, and Turkey are intensifying their presence, offering partnerships without the political conditions of Western aid. China's $300 billion trade with Africa in 2023 and investments in mining dwarf U.S. efforts, while Russia's military support and Turkey's drone technology appeal to resource-rich nations. The future will likely see increased competition, with African nations negotiating better terms for resource extraction to fund development. However, without addressing corruption and insecurity, the benefits may not reach the broader population.